Welcome to You Are Loved. I'm your host, Sarah McCormick, and I am so happy that you're listening today. So, today's podcast is titled Love is a Verb, and it's something that I learned back when I was like 18 years old. So, growing up, I always went to church and I always went to church camp, Camp Meadowland. And one of my good friends, Jenna, actually drug me to camp the year that I graduated. I was actually lucky that I was able to go because it stopped once you graduated. But if they had room, you were allowed to go the year after you graduated high school. And I did. And I think God planned that. I didn't go to senior week because senior week was the same week as camp. So instead of senior week, I went to camp with one of my friends. Every night we would have campfire. We would walk into the woods and there was a big campfire in the middle and there were benches all around and we would sing and we would watch the campfire. And then usually one of the counselors would get up and essentially tell us a story. A lot of times it was a testimonial about how the Lord had worked in their life, but sometimes it was a lesson that we needed to learn. And I will never forget the one night that Uncle Bob, who was the camp director, he had been the camp director for the entire time that I'd been at camp, like 13 years, because I started going to day camp when I was old enough for that, which was like first or second grade. Uncle Bob told us a story. Actually, he said, and I will never forget his words, "I don't always like my wife, but I will always love her." And that really stuck with me. I don't always like my wife, but I will always love her. And it wasn't until I had been married for over 4 years that I finally realized what that meant. I met my husband in college. It was a crazy story. So we both happened to be in the same English class, second semester freshman year. And we did one of those things where they were like, go around the room and introduce yourself and something interesting about yourself. Well, I was a firefighter and EMT and I was VRT certified. So that was always my interesting thing that I told everybody. And my husband happened to go first. And then just the way that we were sitting, we were on opposite sides of the room, but I got to go next. And when I said that, that kind of piqued his interest. He's like, So the first thing he said to me was, "I love when it snows because snow means fire calls." And I was like, "You weirdo. I hate when it snows because I don't like going to fire calls when there's snow on the ground. It's cold outside. I don't like being cold." So he's like, "Oh, great. That didn't work." So then a couple weeks later, he goes, "Do you want to see my miniature? I got the crystals for E-Town Fire and Northwest EMS." So, for those of you who are not familiar, a miniature is a type of pager, and the crystals are what makes the pager go off. So, when they dispatch a fire call, the sound goes out over radio frequencies. And if certain frequencies are hit, then it opens the pager and you can hear what is being transmitted. And he was so very proud of himself that he got the crystals for E-Town Fire and Northwest EMS, which was the fire department and EMS station around our school. And this was back in 2005. So pagers don't work like that pretty much anymore. They've gotten more advanced. But anyway, we started as friends. And it wasn't until the end of 2005 that we actually started dating. In fact, I had dial-up internet at home and I would log on to AOL. Gosh, I'm dating myself here. I would log on to AOL and just to check my email and everything, like it wouldn't even be loaded yet. And he would be IMing me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just leave me alone. Just go away. Just go away. Just go away. Then when we went back to school, this was over the summer. Then when we went back to school, things just changed. And we started officially going out, dating, boyfriend, girlfriend. I don't know. It was never like a title thing for us. In November of 2005. We got married in May of 2009. And then it wasn't until after our first was born that I finally understood what "I may not always like my wife, but I will always love her" meant. So when our son was 6 months old, my husband got a police job in Harrisburg, which is about 2 hours from where we live. and he was on second shift, which meant that he left when I was at work and he got home when I was asleep. So the only time I got to see him was like 5 minutes in the morning before I left for work. Because our son was still a newborn, my parents would invite me over for dinner during the week because it was silly for me to cook an entire meal just for myself. So I would pick up my son from my aunt's house, and then I would actually have to drive past their house to get to my house. So it made sense that I would stop and I would get dinner and then I would go home. And my mom has been married to my dad for over 40 years. I got married in October of 1977. My mom has been a firefighter wife the entire time they have been married. My dad was fire chief for 20 years. And before that, he was an assistant chief. So a majority of their married life was my dad having a position of leadership in the fire company, which meant that anytime that pager went off, he was running out the door to help someone. Sometimes he would be gone for 10 minutes because it was an automatic alarm and nothing needed to be done. And other times he was gone for hours because it was a working fire, or we went to go assist, or we went to go stand by. And one thing my mom always did, because the pager always went off during dinner time. So from a very young age, I was used to sitting down at dinner, the pager going off, listening to what the call was to determine, oh, he'll be back in 15 to 20 minutes, or, okay, we might not see him tonight before we go to bed. And if it was oh, we might not see him tonight before we go to bed, then my mom would take his plate, put saran wrap over it, and put it in the refrigerator so that it was ready for him when he came home. But my mom always made sure to save his meal for him to heat up for when he got home from the call. Once Randy started working second shift, I would get angry. I'm just going to put it out there. I would get angry because I would want to talk to him because I actually like him, and he would be busy with a call, or I would have something that was important to me that I wanted to tell him, and he wouldn't be able to answer the phone, or I would have the phone on speaker so that I could be doing other things, and he would be around people who were saying words that we didn't want our kids to hear. So then I would get angry because I would have to quick run and turn the speaker off on my phone so that the kids didn't hear it. Sometimes I'd ask him a question and somebody else would be talking to him, and it made sense that he had to handle whatever he was handling. But sometimes I would just get frustrated because I would need to tell him something really important and he wasn't there. Growing up with my father as a firefighter, I always felt like we were second. Anytime that pager would go off, he would stop what he was doing, no matter what it was, and go. And so I always felt like I came second to the firehouse. When Randy and I got married, we decided that if we felt like the other person wasn't making us feel loved, if we felt like we were not being appreciated, I really can't find a way to say this without it sounding bad. If we felt like we weren't important, because essentially that's what it boiled down to for me, that we would say something. So I can remember there being a few occasions where I would go and pick Jake up and Randy would be working, and I would go to my parents' house and I would be trying to ask him something because we were still fairly new in our relationship and I didn't 100% know everything that Randy liked to eat. And sometimes it was a matter of, I know you're really not that thrilled about this meal, but would you still like me to package you some up that you can eat for dinner tomorrow night while you're at work? And sometimes I'd be texting him and he wouldn't respond, and then I'd call and then he wouldn't answer his phone, and then I would get frustrated. And I remember one time being like, well, that's fine. Then I'm just not going to make him a meal. And my mom looks at me and she goes, that's not right. And I said, but I'm mad at him. And she goes, do you still love him? I was like, well, yeah, like it's not like I want to get divorced or anything like that. I'm just not very happy with him right now. Okay, well, if you love him, then make him a meal, because that's what you have been doing. Every night you come here, you make a meal for him to eat the next day at work. How would you feel if the roles were reversed and he was the one who was making you a meal and he got mad at you for something silly and he didn't make you a meal? I was like, touche, Mom, touche. So back in May, we celebrated 12 years married, and I still like him. I still love him. There's become fewer and fewer times that I don't like him. But whenever I would get angry at him for whatever reason, I would always remind myself, I may not always like him, but I will always love him. Because for me, love is a promise. Love is something that you do, it's not something that you feel. It's not that jittery feeling in your heart. It's not butterflies in your stomach. It's not, oh, you make me feel like $1,000,000. Love is something that you do. And I think that's part of the reason why relationships fail, because we don't feel love because we don't understand what love is. Love is not your partner always making you happy. Love is not finding your other half. Love is not what you see in the movies where they wake up in the morning and they're like, oh my gosh, you're the best thing that has ever come into my life. I want to spend forever with you. And we're going to have this amazing house on an ocean front and neither of us is going to have to work. And we can just like be in love and spend time with each other all the time. That's not how it works. Love isn't a feeling. Love is an action. If you haven't read the 5 love languages, I encourage you to do that. I read it years ago and it helped me understand what my husband's love language was. Now, I will tell you that our love languages have changed over the years because what we did before that made us feel loved, I mean, our lives have changed. When we met, we were 2 single people, and now we've been married for over a decade and have 2 elementary school age children who are both extremely strong-willed and extremely difficult. And you will hear more about them in later episodes because I've got a lot to talk about there. My love language used to be acts of service. I felt loved when Randy would do stuff for me. And that sounds weird to say that. Acts of service used to be my love language. And I think that is because that is what my dad would do for my mom. And that's how I grew up seeing love. My dad owns his own business. He and his brother do. And he was always around growing up because it was a family business. So if he needed to adjust his schedule, he could. He's a laborer. So the weather had a lot to do with if he was working or not. And my mom worked in a hospital until I was in 5th grade. And then she started working in corporate America. And she had like an hour drive each way. So my dad would cook dinner for her. The dinner was ready when she walked in the door. And he would fold the laundry so that was done. So it was something that she didn't have to do when she came home. I can remember growing up and my dad saying, your mom had a really bad day at work. Let's pick up around the house so that she feels better. And it was just doing things for her that she then did not have to do. So that was really big for me when Randy and I first met, was acts of service, doing something for me to help me make my life easier. He still does a lot of that now. I came up with 3 different things that he does that make me feel loved. He comes to my doctor's appointments with me. I have 4 autoimmune diseases, and he always makes time to come to my doctor's appointments with me, mainly because they're in Philly, and I don't like driving in Philly, and he doesn't mind driving in Philly because that's where he works now. But that's how he shows me love. I'm not going to make you go to those doctor's appointments by yourself. I'm going to go with you. He also gets me my meds every morning and night. And I know that sounds really, really silly, but when you have 4 autoimmune diseases and you're on all these different meds, like I feel trapped at times where it's like when I get up in the morning, I feel like I can't do anything until I take those meds. And then once I take those meds, I'm like, now I can focus on everything else. And then at night, because I have stuff that I take at night, I keep thinking I can't go to sleep until I take my meds. And sometimes I get tired and I'll go to bed. I'll go upstairs early and I'll text Randy and I'll say, hey, can you get my meds ready for me? And he'll get my meds ready for me. When I was working, he would put them in little pill containers for me at the beginning of the week. And then I would take one of those with me to work and take the meds that I needed to take at work. Because I had to take them with food and I would get breakfast at work. One of the other things that he does is he lets me vent. And that was something that took us a long time to work out because typically guys like to fix things and girls just want to be heard, which is crazy for us because usually our roles are flip-flopped where he'll vent and I'll try and solve the problem. And he's like, I just want you to listen to me. I don't want you to try and fix it. I need to get all this out. So before we would start a conversation, we would say, I just want you to listen because I need to get this all out. Or I need you to help me find a solution to this. We still talk on the phone, especially because he's got an hour drive into work. So he will literally leave. And then I'll call him 2 seconds after he's out of the development. And then I'll talk to him the whole way into work. We'll text throughout the day. In March, he was moved to patrol, and he hasn't been in patrol since Emma was born. So it's been like 4 years since he has been in patrol. He had a desk job where he was responsible for handling the different police reports, police report requests. He was quartermaster. He really loved the job because it was Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. He had off holidays and weekends, and it was perfect. And then something happened, and he ended up back in patrol, and he was really worried about it. And so what I did for him was he was on 10-hour shifts. So every hour on the hour, I would send him something. And I found out that I could pre-program them in my phone to automatically send. So the first day, what I did was I compared it to one of the guys that he worked with who was still in the old position that he was in. And I more did it as a, hey, like you're already 10 hours up on Chris because it's Sunday and you're working and he hasn't even started yet. So it's one of those things where I made him think that, he was ahead of the game here, that it really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, because at the end of the week, he got Thursday, Friday, Saturday off, where Chris only got 2 days and he got 3. One day they were all Chuck Norris memes. Another day they were all police officer memes. And when he was halfway through his shift, so once he had completed 5 hours, I would always send him a meme of "you're halfway there." Oh, we're halfway there. Oh, Putin on a bear or chicken on a chair. Like, I found all of those just because I wanted to make him laugh, and then he knew that I was thinking of him because I was sending these to him, and that was one of the ways that I showed him that I loved him, because I didn't know if I would always be able to be there. So he was literally getting text messages from me at 3:00 in the morning. And he's like, how did you even do that? Were you awake? Did you set an alarm? And I said, no, I figured out how to schedule them on my phone. You can schedule text messages to be sent. And that's what I did. And he goes, oh, okay. I was like, I didn't think you were up at 3:00 in the morning sending me text messages. But he goes, I really appreciated them because it helped my day go faster. And it made me feel loved. So then I asked him the other day, I said, okay. I said, I know what you do to make me feel loved. What do I do to make you feel loved? And I tried to guess what they were going to be, but he's honestly a man of few words, and he is not very big on expressing himself. But what he said was, when I listen to him on the phone when he feels anxious, he was diagnosed with generalized anxiety, and there's a lot of different things that play into that. But when he gets anxious, one of the ways that he helps control that was he will call me and talk to me, because he goes, knowing that you're on the phone and knowing that you can hear me, even if you're not talking, makes me feel better. And I'm like, okay. So there are seriously times that I just have my Bluetooth headphones in and the phone call is connected and we're just doing our own thing, because he has stuff that he has to do, but he's feeling very anxious. And just by me being on the other line makes him feel better. And he goes, when you are willing to stay on the phone with me when I'm feeling like that, makes me feel loved. He also said he feels loved when I prep food for him for work, which is something that I haven't done in the longest time, because he's gotten into the habit of not eating at work, because sometimes when he eats certain foods, it makes his anxiety worse. So he has gotten into the habit where he'll eat before he leaves and then he'll eat when he gets home. And then if he feels like he needs something in the middle, he'll grab a snack, but he won't eat an entire meal like he used to. When he first started working, he would eat an entire meal, like a dinner meal, when he would get into work for second shift. And then the other thing, which I have to laugh about this too, he said he feels loved when I help him get organized. So that was one of the things that he first learned when we met, is that I am a super organized person, and I need to thank my 3rd grade teacher for that, because she pretty much forced us to be organized. When Randy was getting ready to study for the sergeant's exam back in 2017, he printed off all of the SOGs that they needed to review that could possibly be questions on the test. So he printed all those out. I hole punched them, put them in 2 different 3-ring binders. I wrote up flashcards for things that I felt he would need to know that were important, different vocabulary things. I even went so far as I actually made practice tests. And I didn't do it for every SOG because there were hundreds of them, but ones that I thought would be important, I made practice tests. And he took the practice tests and then I graded them. And then I said, okay, these are the ones that you got wrong. And then he would go back and he would reread it. And then after a couple more weeks, he would take the practice test again to see how he was improving. Earlier this year, he decided that he was going to go to law school. He was medically disqualified from his job for 5 weeks. And during that 5 weeks, he tried to find another job and he is still looking for another job. And there is honestly nothing out there for him that would pay him what he is getting paid now. He had an interview a few weeks ago and he said a little bit about himself and then he goes, hey, I'm going to tell you that this job you get paid X amount of dollars. And he goes, yeah, I can't survive on that. I'm the only income in the family. We can't survive on that. And it's like, okay, I just wanted to let you know because you kind of seemed overqualified for this job and I didn't want to waste anybody's time by going through the entire interview just to have you say, I can't do that salary. So in January, when he was out medically disqualified, he decided he was going to go to law school. And his mom, who had been up at the time, she's getting ready to sell her house because her sister and brother-in-law who live with her are moving to England. She said, if you get into law school, I'll pay for it. Okay. So the next thing you know, he's on Amazon buying an LSAT book. Okay. And in the front of that test prep book, they had a suggested timeline of how to go through the book to complete it on time, but also as to not overwhelm yourself. So what I did was I took the book and I put different tabs in them. And I said, okay, 6 weeks out, you read these chapters and they're this color. And 5 weeks out, you read these chapters and they're this color. And 4 weeks out, you read these chapters and they're this color. And I tabbed his entire book. And then he worked through that book based on those different tabs. I said, okay, well, this week you're going to be focusing on these yellow tabs or these blue tabs. When I organize, I'm a color person. Organizing by color helps me a lot. And then today we went back to school shopping because he had been really itching to go back to school shopping. So I said, okay, we got the stuff for the kids. Emma's starting kindergarten. So all she seriously needed was a backpack and a whiteboard eraser and a box of 24 crowns. And then our son is going into 3rd grade and he needed more stuff than that. And then Randy started getting the things that the different books that he has been reading to get prepped for law school told him to get. So we ended up getting a stapler. I'm like, they tell you to get a stapler? And he goes, yeah, apparently the professors just don't like staple things. So the guy who wrote this book said, bring a stapler with you so you can literally staple your papers together so they don't get mixed up and they don't get lost. Staple them when you get them. It's like, okay. So he got the different things that he needed and he's taking 3 classes in a lab. So he is doing the part-time program. So he goes nights and he has 3 classes in a lab. So we got 3 notebooks and 3 binders. And as we're in the store getting them, I said, don't forget, make sure that the notebook colors you can get in a binder color. So he grabbed gray, green, and red, and then blue for his lab. So we went and we grabbed a gray binder and a green binder and a red binder. And then we got a smaller blue binder for his lab. And then we wound up having to go to 2 different Targets because they didn't have everything that we needed at the one in the back to school section. So I was like, let's go to our Target, our home Target, the Target we usually go to, and got the rest of our stuff. So as we're walking through the back to school section, I find a label maker and it's purple. And I'm like, Randy, I need this. And he goes, it's $35. We don't have $35. I'm like, I've wanted one of these forever. He goes, what are you going to use it for? I said, how many things have I labeled in our house with blue painter's tape and a black Sharpie? And then he goes, okay, you can get it. So it was one of these special cool color ones. So it came with purple sparkly labels and blue labels and silver labels. So I labeled all of Emma's stuff in purple and all of Jake's stuff in blue and all of Randy's stuff in silver. So I literally went through and I printed his name stuck it on the front of every one of his notebooks. And then I took the dividers that we found and I put them in every one of his 3-ring binders. And then I put the colored notebook inside the 3-ring binder so it's all together. So I got these Post-it notes, and I got the little ones that are like little like flag type thingies. They're just really, really thin. I was like, you can use these to mark different pages that you need to constantly refer to. That way you don't have to keep your hand in it. You can use those to flip back and forth. And I said, here, I got you these little tabby things that are sturdier that you can write on. If you need to mark different sections in your book, you can put a tab in there, because that's what I used when I did his stuff for studying for the LSAT. And then I got him little, like, I don't know if they were like 1 by 1 or 1.5 by 1.5 Post-it notes, the little ones, not the normal size ones, the little ones. And I said, well, get these too, because I know you'll probably write in your book, but if it's something you need to like elaborate on and just stick on something, like that's another option that you can have to write it on the Post-it note and then stick it right on the paragraph so that you know what's there. We wound up getting this really awesome pencil case that he can make it stand up, like the top opens and it stands up like a pencil cup. I was like, I've got all of your Post-its in there. I've got your highlighters in there. I've got your pens in there. I've got your pencils in there. You're good to go. And his mom was making fun of me because I was getting all that stuff prepped for him. And it's like, what? You don't think that Randy can organize himself? But I know that he likes when I do that for him. That makes him feel loved, that I took the time to put all that together for him so that he can succeed in what he wants to do. Love looks different for everyone. But I think what we need to remember is that love is an action. Because if you think back to all those things that we just talked about, when I get him organized, I'm doing something for him. And when he gets me my meds, he's doing something for me. He's doing something. He's not there going, oh my gosh, I feel so loved. You're thinking about organizing things for me. Or, oh my gosh, I feel so loved because you thought about getting my meds and then didn't. But you thought about it, so I feel love. Love is a verb. Love is something that we do for someone else. And maybe if we can view love that way, and that it's something we do opposed to something we feel, maybe there would be a little more love in this world. Thank you for joining me today. And have a great day.